Hello, and welcome to our first training of the West Virginia Family Survey Database. To access the West Virginia Family Survey or staff surveys, and to access the grantee data entry page, go to www.wvfamilysurvey.org. To access the survey itself, click on the first box, Family or Staff Survey. For more information about the family survey itself, go back to the main page, select the Download Resources button, and reference the WV User Guide. In this guide, you'll learn about the purpose of the survey, how and when to administer the survey, and there's even a QR code to share with families for easy access to the survey link. But today, we will be focusing on the grantee data entry page. The grantee data entry page is designed to collect information for Family Support Center or FSC grantees about individuals and families served, as well as community participation in specific activities. Only FSCs have access to the grantee data entry page, and currently, each FSC has a specific username and password to enter grantee activity counts and family intake information. FSC usernames and passwords are available by asking your program manager or supervisor. So first, you'll hit Grantee Data Entry. You'll type in your username and password and hit Login. Once you log in, the page is organized into three sections. Two for data collection, which are the family intake forms and the activity counts, and one for reports. In today's video, we'll be solely focusing on the family intake forms at the top. FSC agencies or grantees are asked to create a family intake for each family who utilizes grant-funded services. After a family has been entered into the data system, grantees are asked to add a new intake form for them each fiscal year in which they receive services. So step one is to select the Family Intake Forms button. Step two is to check to see if a family has already been entered. To do this, enter the first name, the last name, and/or the date of birth for the family's self-appointed head of household. So we'll use an example here. We'll do Smith as the last name, and we'll put in his birthday, and then hit search. Once you hit search, it will show you under search results if the person is already in the system. Alternatively, you can just type in the last name to see broader results. So I'll remove the date of birth, I'll remove the first name, and hit search again. This will show you a list of all head of households with the last name Smith. If a family does not already exist in the system, then step three is to add a new family by clicking the Add New Family button on the right. First thing that you'll do is fill out the family contact information at the top of the page. For this demonstration, we will be entering dummy data. So we'll put in a last name, a first name, a date of birth, an address, and a city. We'll put a zip code, select the county, and add a phone number. It also asks you here to type in the greatest strengths of the head of household. And this is really a conversation that the staff member will be having when you're filling out the family intake. So for here, an example might be great communication skills. When you hit add, A case ID will be auto-generated for the family. Once you hit add, you'll see a note at the top of the screen that says the family has been added. And now if you scroll down, you'll see the annual intake forms that you're able to add a new intake form. So we'll hit add new intake form. And the next step is to complete all of the questions on the intake form, selecting next at the bottom of each screen to save the information and move on to the next page. All questions with the red asterisk are required and must be answered to proceed to the next screen. So on this first page, you'll start off by selecting the intake date and typing in the staff or volunteer first name. It starts off with some demographic questions, which ask about gender, race, ethnicity, and highest level of education. Hit next to go to the next page. Then asks about relationship status and employment status. Next page. The next page continues to ask for some household information. It starts by asking about family housing. It also asks if any of the following circumstances apply to the head of household. And for this question, you'll want to check all that apply. For example, if the applicant is a grandparent, if the applicant is a teen parent, if they've been diagnosed with a cognitive or physical disability, if they have limited English proficiency, or you can select none of the above or prefer not to say. Next asks some additional household questions such as the number of people in the household and the average monthly family income. Once you select the number of people in the household and the average monthly income, it will automatically generate whether or not the family's income is 300% or less of the federal poverty level. So for this question, you do not need to select yes or no. Again, it will be auto-generated based off of the previous two questions. Then you'll hit next. And this next part of the family intake form asks about services that the family is currently receiving or needing. So for this page, you'll check the buttons to indicate which services the family receives or needs assistance with. So for example, you might check off that the family receives child support, that they receive Medicaid, but that perhaps they need WIC. You accidentally select one of the buttons. For example, you accidentally selected that they receive child care assistance from the state and you want to undo that. You'll click Clear State Services, and then you'll just have to reselect the services that they are currently receiving or needing. So we'll click Receiving Child Support, we'll click Receiving Medicaid, and then we'll click Needing WIC. At the top of the page are the state services. And if you scroll down, you'll have a list of additional services. And same for this page, you'll want to check off whether they are receiving or needing the current service. If the family is neither receiving nor needing assistance in that way, you'll want to just leave the columns blank and not select anything. And for these additional services, you also have a text box under each service if you wanted to provide more detail. For example, you might have needing concrete needs, and you might put a note that they need food. You'll go through the rest of this page and then hit next to save your information. Towards the end of the form, it asks, how do you think we can use your strengths to meet your needs? And this is an open-ended question that staff should be talking through with the head of the household based on the strengths that they identified in the beginning and the services that they identified as needing. The last page of the family intake form asks for a list of other household members. And so only people in which the head of the household lives with and shares food with should be included on this page. Each household member must be added individually. And to add a member, you'll select this blue button, Add Household Member. Similarly to the head of household questions, there are a few demographic questions for each household member. So you will fill out their first and last name, their date of birth, and here is where you'll select the head of household's relationship to this person. So, for example, the head of household here is the birth parent, so you will select birth parent from the dropdown. You'll select for race ethnicity all that apply. And again, you'll fill out if any of the following circumstances apply to this household member. If none of them apply, you'll hit none of the above. Once you hit save at the bottom here, you'll return to the previous screen where you can either add another household member or finalize the intake. What's important to note here is that household members from families that already have an existing family intake and are currently in the system will carry over to new intake forms each fiscal year. So you won't have to individually add each household member each year. Instead, if a listed member no longer lives in the household or shares food with the head of household, you'll be able to select deactivate here to change the status of the family member. So when a family member is first created, their status will automatically show as active. However, if they no longer live in the household and you click deactivate, you'll see a note at the top of the screen that says the member has been deactivated and their status will change to inactive. It will not permanently delete this member from this page. However, it'll just show that the status is inactive. If an inactive member moves back into the household or needs to be re-added to the record, you can select Activate to the right to change their status back to active. So hit Activate. You'll see a note at the top of the screen that says the member has been activated, and you'll see that their status has changed back to active. Once you hit Finalize, it will take you back to the family's main profile, and you will see that an intake form for the current fiscal year has been added and finalized here. So that is how to create a family intake in the West Virginia Family Survey database. In our next training video, we will be covering activity counts. For any questions or concerns, please review our WV user guide or contact Jill Johnson at jijohnson@pcgus.com.